While most of the Western world rejects the death penalty, the issue remains controversial here in the United States, with the country split almost down the middle over what to do about it. Now, this controversy has led to every supplier of FDA-approved lethal injection drugs to refuse providing them.
Pharmaceutical company Pfizer has announced it is blocking the use of its drugs for lethal injections in the United States.
That, together with a lengthy appeals process, can create endless days of execution. In Nevada, one condemned prisoner has had enough. So in a bizarre twist, the state turned to a drug so deadly that it took the lives of 19,000 Americans in 2016. The opioid, fentanyl.
We're driving up to Ely State Prison in Nevada. This is where Scott Dozier is being held. And we had an interview scheduled with him inside the prison, but it was canceled because his execution was stayed at the last minute. But since we're here, we're just going to give him a call.
You have a prepaid call from
Scott Dozier,
an inmate at Nevada Department of Corrections, Ely State Prison.
Hey, John, what's going on?
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Doing reasonably well, all things considered.
Scott Dozier is 47 years old. He was convicted of 2 murders while manufacturing and dealing drugs in Arizona and Nevada.
Miller's torso was found in 2 pieces, placed in suitcases, dumped in a Valley apartment complex.
Dozier was sentenced to death in 2007 for the murder of 22-year-old Jeremiah Miller. And after nearly a decade on death row, Dozier waived his rights to appeal. He told the judge he was ready to die. Can you help people understand why so badly you want to die?
It isn't that I want to die. It's that I'd rather be dead than do this. This should have been a straightforward legal action. You spend millions of dollars cramming the death penalty down my throat. You spend $1 million on the death chamber, and tens to hundreds of thousands avoiding using it and carrying out a lawful, though dubious sentence. And all to amount to extended and vastly unnecessary, cruel, and unusual circumstances and torture. You say you're gonna fucking kill someone, you should fucking kill him.
Do you still maintain your innocence?
Yeah, I do. But that's not what I'm trying to say here either. It's not like I was just Joe Innocent pegged for these things, you know what I'm saying? I was a criminal. I was a drug manufacturer. I was a drug distributor. I intentionally and willfully engaged in a life outside of the law. All that matters is this is a legally obtained conviction, and I would rather be dead than this any longer.
Nevada has more than 70 men on death row, but they haven't executed anybody for more than 12 years. So when Dozier volunteered in October 2016, it sent the state into a tailspin because they didn't actually have a way to execute him. That's because by 2016, every supplier of FDA-approved lethal injection drugs in the country had banned the sale of their products for use in executions.
Pharmaceutical suppliers that once provided the drug for lethal injection now refuse.
Nevada was forced to search for a new solution.
Nebraska and Nevada are considering using fentanyl to kill death row inmates.
How do you feel about fentanyl?
I think that's fucking awesome, quite frankly. It's killing people all over the place. I've never been a big opiate user, but I have a couple of times, and it's pretty fairly sedate way to go.
Because this drug cocktail had never been tested, questions about whether the combination would be effective and humane ultimately led to a stay of execution. At the first hearing after the stay, it was the state prosecutors who seemed to be arguing on Dozier's behalf.
All right. Judge, at the beginning of this, when Mr. Dozier first said I wanted to give up all my rights and submit to the sentence, you found him competent. He has been consistent with you from the very beginning. The bottom line here is, it's his choice. And he said to you, I want to go forward with the cocktail as drafted.
It's his choice within certain parameters, because if it was really his choice, perhaps the first suicide that he attempted back in some corrections facility in Arizona would have been fruitful and they would have just let him pass. So it's his choice with certain parameters, right?
Yes.
And so, I appreciate that argument, but it's not as simple as that.
Historically, during a lethal injection, 3 drugs are used in a specific order. The anesthetic makes them unconscious, the paralytic renders them immobile, and the last drug stops their heart. While fentanyl is what made headlines, it's the use of the paralytic that the court questioned. Expert witnesses testified that the use of the paralytic, which they say only serves to mask any suffering, could lead to a cruel death, a breach of the Eighth Amendment. So the court demanded the paralytic be removed. The state, however, won't proceed without it. And at this point, Dozier doesn't care. He just wants to move forward. After 10 years on death row, Dozier's case continued to stall, pending a ruling from the state Supreme Court.
When you learned that the execution was stayed, was there any part of you that felt relief?
No. I can say unequivocally, no, not at all. What was your assessment of the situation?
I guess what seemed a little bit strange to me is that the state wants you executed, you want to be executed, and yet you all aren't able to move forward with it.
Yeah, it starts to call all sorts of things into question for me, like, does the state really want me executed? Or do they just want to be able to say they execute people but never really do it? I still prefer a bullet, but, I mean...
So firing squad?
Yes. Ideally, it'd be a single person walking me out somewhere and he looks me in the eye and he stops me in front of face.
While that may sound crazy, a string of widely covered botched executions is making lethal injection less and less appealing.
Last Thursday, Dennis McGuire took nearly 25 minutes to die from a mixture of drugs never before used in executions.
Clayton Lockett was the first inmate injected with the state's new mix of lethal drugs. But minutes after being declared unconscious, Lockett tried to lift his head and began squirming. Prison officials halted the execution.
Inmates are now requesting to be killed by gunfire, a method that is more effective than lethal injection. In Utah, Representative Paul Ray successfully led the campaign to bring back the firing squad in 2015.
Well, we have a death penalty, and we didn't have any way to use the death penalty. You know, the drug makers decided that they were done selling drugs, so we needed to have a plan B. I prefer the firing squad because, quite honestly, what people don't see, the whitewashing on the lethal injection, is there is suffering. You know, basically you're paralyzed by the medication, then we stop your breathing. There's obviously a lot of agonizing.
How much do you think these decisions by states to only move forward with drugs has to do with public image, has to do with optics?
It has a lot to do with it. It's not a pretty sight to take somebody's life, whether you do it with lethal injection, firing squad, electric chair, gas chamber, whatever. It's very serious. And you know, the thing about the optics of the firing squad is it brings back the seriousness of what we're actually doing. Generally, we'll use 5 shooters, 4 of which will have a live round, 1 will have a blank, pin the target over the heart, and then the orders are given.
And what do you say to those who argue that the firing squad is just too brutal?
See what they did to their victims, and let's talk about being brutal. The fact is these guys are monsters. You know, they're not here because they sing too loud in the choir on Sunday. They're here because they brutalize people. The whole situation of taking a life is not pretty. If you have the death penalty, you've got to find a way to pull it off and understand that you can't window dress it, which is what they've tried to do with lethal injections, or you get rid of it.
At least 16 states allow for other execution methods, but not Nevada. They're entirely reliant on lethal injection. It took an additional 5 months before a warrant was finally signed and Dozier was given an execution date, July 11th.
So you're going to be dead in 2 days?
Yeah. I am.
Have you processed that?
I mean, as much as a person can, right? That's a heavy-duty thing, isn't it?
2 days before his scheduled execution, we visited Dozier on death row for what was meant to be his final interview.
So you were convicted of 2 murders. You've been on death row for 10 years.
Yep, that's right.
Well, why are you still alive?
Right? I mean, I can tell you the specifics of why it happens, but you know, these people don't want to die, and as long as the FPD's officer and these other people that represent us, as long as no one's being killed, they're cool with that. So they just use dilatory tactics, and that's the actualities of why no one's getting killed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I mean, but as far as why the state's not pushing for it, that's not an answer I can begin to even conceive. I don't know. I don't get it at all.
Why do you think the country has turned to lethal injection as opposed to the other methods?
Well, you know, that whole idea it's more humane, they're just a bunch of pussies. You know, you're murdering somebody, man. It's gonna be brutal.
In fact, the new drug protocol, released 8 days before the execution, included a drug substitute that created even more controversy.
Midazolam is the drug that's been involved in all these box executions, these guys gasping for air suffering for more than an hour.
My understanding of that is that that's the side effects of midazolam. Midazolam causes clenching, some thrashing, coughing. So actually, I was going to bring that up with my mother and say, listen, just so you know, I've talked to people and that said that that happens with midazolam. So don't take that as indications that I'm having a bad time, you know what I mean?
So do you expect for that to happen?
I do.
And you're cool with that?
I don't care. I'm not going to get up off that fucking table.
How do you feel about the state using fentanyl to kill you?
I think it's awesome. Look, I mean, it's killing people all over the place. You guys get pharmaceutical-grade fentanyl and just bang me up, man. Use a shit ton.
Do you believe in the death penalty?
You know, I'm ambivalent about it because I think if there's a wrong that needs killing, you know, I mean, if that's the answer to it, people should be able to do it. But I'm also opposed to governments of any sort killing their citizens.
So you're thankful that it's legal here?
Yes, but it's pretty conflicting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Do you think you deserve the death penalty?
No, I don't, though, actually. However, I think that if Jeremiah Miller's family really thinks I killed him, they should have the opportunity to kill me. You know what I mean? And so I guess maybe I do believe to some extent in an eye for eye. I mean, I know how I would respond if somebody killed somebody I loved, and I was sure they did it. I mean, like, someone raped your sister, the only thing you do is bail that person out of jail. You know what I mean?
Kill them?
I didn't say that. I said you bail them out of jail.
It's interesting, just because it's not the world we live in.
I get it. I lived outside that world, you know what I'm saying?
What do you hope for your son? What do you hope for your grandkids?
They are more successful in finding happiness and some degree of satisfaction and gratification in a life within the parameters, you know what I'm saying? My inability to do that clearly is a sizable portion for me being here. And I just hope they're able to do that, you know what I mean?
Hours before his scheduled execution, while Dozier was saying his final goodbyes to his family, a judge ruled to stay his execution. The company that manufactured the midazolam sued at the last minute, alleging that the state of Nevada had fraudulently purchased the drug. So after a decade on death row and nearly 2 years of trying to get executed, Dozier is now showing us just how hard it is to die on death row.
What's the hardest part of all this?
The not knowing and the additional stressors and drama, trauma, etc. that it's putting the people I care about through. Like for my family, it's like, okay, so do we need to leave the next 6 months open? You know what I mean? Like, not only me, but real genuine innocent people. My family, the Miller family, the citizens of Nevada,